Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and it's Connect Week. Meta Connect is happening later this week, and yes, I'll be on site going hands-on with new games, chatting with developers, and hopefully getting some time with new hardware as well, and maybe even a few surprises. But I do have some exciting hardware on the table today, as today we'll be taking a look and examining the Logitech MX Ink stylus that was announced this past summer that works natively with the Meta Quest 3 and Quest 2 headsets. Because in the world of AR, VR, XR, input seems to be one of the emerging distinguishing factors between these headsets. Whether you have on the Apple Vision Pro, where Apple has gone really all in on hand tracking and eye tracking as this input, no track controllers. Well, Meta and their Quest headsets have really made track controllers, these Touch Plus controllers, the Touch Pro controllers, and now the Logitech MX Ink as a distinguishing factor, in addition to the hand tracking support that they have on these headsets. And I'm including the MX Ink in this because while it is a third-party accessory made by Logitech, designed by their engineers, it actually feels a lot like a first-party device. It's one of the more interesting things about how this is tracked and how it integrates with the Quest 3 as I've been using it. It's not the first attempt at having a stylus in VR or AR. In fact, the Quest Pro controllers, these Touch Pro ones that have their own SLAM inside-out tracking, if you recall, you could actually swap out the wrist strap here with kind of a nub that may turn the controller, turned upside down, into something like a stylus. And when they launched this with Horizon Workrooms, one of the ideas was that you could go to a virtual whiteboard and actually draw or press against a wall and get some type of passive feedback by pressing this against a hard surface. It's still tracked in 6 degrees of freedom space and kind of works as a semi-ergonomic stylus. I thought it was a really neat and novel idea. Didn't really take off. Now, Logitech themselves also had a prototype track stylus that they showed off back in 2019 in Augmented World Expo. This was kind of a fat stylus that worked with Steam VR trackers. So it was like a ring in the back that had the Steam VR Lighthouse sensors. I think they announced it for pre-order for $750, really outside the price range for anyone who would be working in productivity or in art, in VR art, to make a practical purchase. MX Ink makes use of the Quest 3's constellation style tracking. So of course there are cameras on these headsets, and the way these controllers are tracked, in addition to a gyroscope on the inside, is there is a hidden arrangement of IR LEDs embedded in these controllers. Back in the old days, it was around a ring on top, but that design, that constellation arrangement of IR LEDs and the way they blink has been simplified so that no ring is needed. And so that tracking system seems to be robust enough now to enable those same IR LEDs in a unique configuration to also be embedded on a stylus form factor. And this really is, you pick it up and it feels naturally like a stylus or like a pen. It's a little bit thicker in diameter than your typical Sharpie marker, so it's not as thin as like an Apple Pencil, but it fits comfortably in my hands. It has, it actually feels like 3 sides, even though as it tapers out, you see it kind of has a hexagonal design in the back, but in a natural holding position, it feels like holding a fat marker, and pretty ergonomic with the way it's angled here. It is supposed to be a complement to the touch controllers. So you can use this instead of a touch controller because it does have buttons as well. So let's run through actually all the input methods on this input device. You have 3 buttons on the top here. On the surface, there's a front button, a rear button, and then the center here is actually a capacitive button that has pressure sensitivity. So you can push this down, and it doesn't quite click, but it does detect how much pressure you're putting on here. We'll get to that in a little bit. On the tip, there is pressure sensitivity on the stylus as well. So very much if you put this on a surface and start writing in a supported application, you will get full pressure sensitivity. And then in the back, there's a meta button that basically replaces the menu button on your primary dominant hand controller. So you press this and the menu pops up, you hold it, and you'll be resetting your alignment. Charges over USB-C and has, they say, over 7 hours of standard battery life, whether you're using it all day or turning on the vibration haptics motors as well. I think it's an LRA, linear resonant actuator motor in this, so very sensitive vibration feedback. This is $130, and they are selling it in a bundle with a dock that they're calling the Inkwell, which basically is a weighted device that you plug your MX Ink in and then plug this into USB-C, and then the system knows that it's docked. You pick it up, you press the button, and then it takes over as your controller. And this is where the seamless integration I mentioned really comes into play, because this doesn't just work in supported applications with developers that Logitech has partnered with, whether it's Figment XR, Gravity Sketch, Shapes XR, OpenBrush, Gestures VR, Paint VR, the kind of standard crowd of both productivity and creativity applications. This also works in the base operating system, Horizon OS, of your Quest headset. You can use this as a laser pointer, use it as a way to control the menus, and it doesn't even look like your touch controller in headset. It looks like a perfect representation of the MX Ink. You pair it by opening your Horizon application on your smartphone. It pairs as if you would be pairing one of these Touch Plus controllers. And at that point, your headset can be paired with, in addition to maybe a keyboard, touch controllers, and this stylus. Now, you may have seen in a press release, it says this is the first time it's tracking 3 devices. And it's not actually tracking all 3 devices at the same time. What's really interesting to learn about how this constellation tracking system works in Quest 3 is that it can track 2 devices, but it can be aware that there are up to these 3 devices now that it can swap between. So by default, it's going to assume that you're right-handed, for example. And so I may have my Touch Plus controllers here. I'm using them in the operating system. If I put down the controller, pick up the MX Ink, press a button, and then it automatically switches the tracking from the touch controller to now the stylus. And I can be working with one hand using a touch controller and the other hand having a stylus, complete with that ray-casted beam to point at things, select items, and even have comparable analogs to the buttons that you would have on this controller. So I think the front button activates as the grip button, the middle button, press sensitive area here. This button works as the trigger. And the back button you can program to be your A button or your B button if you double tap it. The front stylus here, if there is no special configuration, actually works kind of as a thumbstick sliding to the right. And there is no otherwise thumbstick on here, so it does have fewer input buttons than one of these, but sufficient enough that if you open an application that doesn't have full support for the MX Ink, you can still get by. I mean, right now, as of pre-launch, some applications I tried don't have the full version of this implemented, but I could still use Gestures VR, align the tracking of the stylus, and work on that virtual canvas pretty well. That seamless interchangeability between the controller and the stylus makes this feel like almost a first-party device. And from my understanding, Logitech had to work pretty closely with Meta's team on the Horizon side to make sure that integration was seamless, and it really feels that way. And so while it will be up to Logitech to convince developers to adopt their SDK to make their applications fully compatible with a 3D tracked representation of the MX Ink, that seamless integration in just the base level Quest 3 operating system kind of, I think, gets over a little bit of that chicken and egg problem of, does this make sense for developers to support if there is this friction of getting users to purchase this and then build it into their workflows. From Logitech's perspective, I think they want as many people who are already working in VR, who are either using it for their jobs, using it for productivity or creativity, to have this as an option, so that you don't need to be forced to be switching to using this if you don't need to. But those moments, those times when you are launching a creative application, are opening Tilt Brush, want to do a drawing session or painting session, this is going to be so easily at the ready for you to just pick up, press a button, and be using this different form factor. And that form factor, in my use, actually is really meaningful. I mean, not just the ability to write and get this ability to have that intuitive writing on a flat surface or on a wall if you're simulating a whiteboard, which you really can't do as easily with a track controller, but even in painting applications, which have so far been optimized for this form factor of a touch controller, and you can still use this really well to mimic a paintbrush. I found that being able to hold this like a paintbrush, hold it like a wand, hold it like a pen, well, one, it feels more natural. It's the way that we've been using art tools forever, right? But also, I think it gives that more nuanced control over the stylus, over the virtual paintbrush, when you are able to hold it with two fingers, when you're able to kind of flick this across and create more natural gestures. Pressure sensitivity, also really interesting on this middle button here, because while obviously it makes sense to have pressure sensitivity if you're using this as a pen, and you can absolutely feel that and see that in Logitech's demo application, that pressure sensitivity. In 3D space, when you're not actually pressing this against anything, holding this button, softly depressing it, in Logitech's demo app, I was actually able to see how effective I could actually get these brush strokes, get these lines to go thicker and thinner just by subtly adding more pressure on either my index finger or using it on my thumb here as a brush. So really cool that they included two areas of pressure sensitivity. Initially, turning this on and feeling the haptics on this, for example, I felt like maybe the haptics didn't feel so strong. They're not very like booming vibration motors in here, but it's really the subtlety of the haptics, the feeling of pressing this virtual stylus as a paintbrush against a canvas that isn't really there, and getting that subtle vibration feedback as the virtual brush hits the virtual canvas. That felt really powerful. The fidelity of that experience, combined with the graphics and physics and the ability to mix paint that you have in an application like painting VR, was really, really fun and powerful. And it was more fun than just holding these controllers. And ergonomically, this isn't bad, but this felt like, it felt like the real thing. So I've been really pleased so far with how well the MX Ink has been performing. And tracking wise, there are actually some of the IR LEDs embedded in the back here. So you can hold this away from you, straight away from you. You don't have to be looking at the side of this, and it's still tracked well. The one area where I lost tracking was when I was holding it looking at me. So if you're kind of holding a brush, and for any reason, if you're like doing a 3D piece of artwork, you're looking at the tip of the stylus, that isn't a great place. That loses tracking. Or in the cases where I was maybe gripping the stylus completely with my hand and using it like a big brush, I was blocking those IR LEDs, and in rare cases also lost tracking there. So at a price point of $130, I don't think it's a device that every owner of the Quest or Quest 2 needs, but if you're someone who works in that creative space or professional space and makes use of Gravity Sketch or Shapes XR in a meaningful way to design things for work or for fun, or you're spending a lot of time in OpenBrush or Figment XR or enjoy painting VR, this does feel like a game changer for those creative tools. And maybe the missing piece of the puzzle, when the Quest Pro launched with Meta's ambitions to have VR be a productivity device, having this extra input method could have gone a long way to making that more effective, especially with today's suite of productivity and creativity applications. And we finally have now a third-party made track controller using the Quest's inside-out controller tracking system, that constellation tracking system. Something we've been asking for way back. I remember chatting with Nate Mitchell about what it would take for their system to track third-party things like keyboards or mice, and of course the stylus makes so much sense. It gives me a better appreciation for how much the engineering challenge that might be to have things tracked. So I don't think we're necessarily going to get tracked game pads or tracked joysticks to use in VR necessarily in the near future, but the possibility is out there if and when it makes sense, and I'm glad Logitech is leading the way and has led the way here with the MX Ink. And I'll see you later this week with coverage from Meta Connect. See you next time.